Okay, this is the second of my exploratory videos on the subject of producing a physical book and looking at the Bullet Catcher's Handbook as the thing that I'm going to produce. And so last time I looked at the overall concept of the thing, and I really went for some design elements that were proof of concept. And in this session, I want to kind of get into looking at Microsoft Word as a way that I might choose to lay this thing out. Now, let's get from the start that Microsoft Word is not designed as a desktop publishing system, and there are much more sophisticated, much more powerful, and in some senses much less irritating systems that you can use for desktop publishing. But Microsoft Word does have one or two advantages. One of those is it's so widely available, and that actually people tend to be pretty familiar with it already. And so there are one or two things that Microsoft Word is not good at sorting out with desktop publishing. One of those is if you want to take an image right to the very edge of the page, which you can apparently do when you lay it out on the page in the document, but it has a problem that there is no facility that I've managed to find out within Microsoft Word for adding what are known as bleed zones. These are this is a kind of a little overlap of the color going out beyond the limit of the page, which is important when you're actually going to print something, because otherwise a very slight misalignment, a microscopic misalignment of paper and image in the printing itself, which is more or less inevitable, will leave you with a very thin sliver of a white line down a couple of sides of the page. No real need to go into the detail of why that is now. If people are interested, I can explore that in another video. But this is the basic problem with Microsoft Word and images right to the edge of the page. You just can't do it. There may be a workaround there, which I will perhaps explore at some later stage, using outputting as Adobe PDF files and then putting those into Adobe Acrobat, and then Adobe Acrobat, I believe, may be able to add those bleed zones for us. But for the moment, let's just take it that this is not the right system if that's what you want to do. The other thing that Microsoft Word is really, really bad at when it comes to desktop publishing is allowing you to have different parts of the document with different parameters attached to it. So, for example, you may not want page numbers for the first few pages of your book, and for the opening blank pages or the title page and things like that. But then when you get into the place where it says part 1 or chapter 1 or whatever it is, you probably want to start having page numbers there. Now, there is something within Microsoft Word that's supposed to do this, but I have personally found it terribly, terribly tricky, and I've found consistently it's hard to operate. And so what I do now, I'll come to later, but it is a kind of workaround using Adobe to stick different PDF files together. But we'll get into that later. So for the moment, with those provisos that Word has these limitations, I'm going to just shift over to my Word document that I've now been working on for a little while. And here it is. And what you'll see straight away is that I have set up the document so that it will show me 2 pages together. And that's because if you have an actual book, just reach over and get an actual book, we open it up, that's exactly what we see, 2 pages together. So I want to be able to visualize that most easily, and therefore I want to see that. I've set this up in such a way that I've, as you'll see, labelled the first page as inside cover white. And that is because I just want that to be, I'm visualizing that as the inside of the front cover. As we open up the book, here we go, we open it up, the inside of the cover, oops, I can't show you here, inside of the cover, which I am in my book wanting to be white. And then sometimes when we go in, we get the second page, which is a slightly different colour paper. And I would like that for this. It gives a sense of separation between the cover and the inner pages. And I think in design terms it can be quite elegant. So I've at the moment written on page 2, blank page, ivory coloured paper. Now I may change all this in the future, but for the moment that's what we've got. Now I'm going to scroll through. As we go down, you'll see that I do have page numbers at the moment. I've put those in just to get a sense of what they'll look like, but I'm going to strip them out when we come to the later stages of the design, because I don't want page numbers on these introductory blank pages. So then we come into the second pair of pages, and I want the inside. Oh, I've said, you can see I've made a mistake here. Blank page, ivory coloured paper. This is blank page, ivory coloured paper. Because that's the inside of the same sheet. Can't be different. And then I have a frontispiece. It's a lovely word, frontispiece, isn't it? Frontispiece. It's in this case it's going to be the title page, and this is the design that I showed you in the first video, which was proof of concept. At the moment I've just kind of dumped it into the page here. Exactly how far it can go in and how far the margins might push it one way or the other is really going to depend on the type of binding that we'll eventually end up with. Because if you end up with what I'm hoping for, a hardback binding with stitching in it, you open the page up and you will see all the way to the actual middle of the page, all the way to the very edge of the page, sorry. But if you have something that is a different kind of binding, this is perfect binding here, so it's glued in there, and we open it up and we don't get right into the very middle of the book. We don't see the very edge of the page, so I kind of lose a little bit of the page because it just won't open up that much. So the specific types of binding will give us different things, and I don't yet know yet. I haven't researched that yet, so I don't know how far one way or another this page could be. I can move the image around, and whether it will look centered or not will depend on the kind of binding we're going to have. We'll sort that out later. I can also, if I need, shrink it or grow it. And whereas I did say in the last video that I thought the size, the aspect ratio might be a little bit wrong for my A6 document, I think I've got plenty of room to tweak that. So actually I think we were close enough, and I can basically use that unedited if I wish. So far so good. We're going to move on now, and I'm going to show you the next 2 pages. So the reverse side of that frontispiece, there's the frontispiece, the reverse side of it, I want copyright information. Now I thought about this, I should perhaps say copyright 2021. I can see that I'm using the numbers in this font come out looking a little bit different. I'm going to have to think about that. 2021. But that it evokes modern times. That's now, isn't it? 2021. So I was thinking of putting that copyright thing in Roman, which I think perhaps disguises it. Anything you write and produce, you own the copyright of anyway. So the statement that this is copyrighted material is just a sort of a thing to make sure there's no ambiguity in it. I don't think I don't know, I'm not a lawyer here, but I don't think that it would be any problem for me if I put that in Roman instead. And I think putting it in Roman, MMXXI, it kind of maintains the feeling. What I want with this book is I want it to feel as if it's just dropped through a portal and it actually belongs in the time it's come from, or the alternate history it's come from. Okay, so we open on a front-facing page. Now this is, let's see if I can grab a book. This is a really important concept, that in our pairs of pages, one is front-facing, one is back-facing. And, well, what's really the difference? The difference is that here we have our little Shakespeare book again. We're going to go in, and here we go at the very beginning. The front-facing pages have a kind of implied authority. They have a kind of implied importance. So that stuff that has got that importance, like chapter 1, forward, the frontispiece, tend to be on front-facing pages, whereas stuff that are slightly lower priority, perhaps the copyright information, tends to be on back-facing pages. And so here we go again. Here is the opening of this Shakespeare book, and we have the front-facing page where we have our heading and we start, and the back-facing page there is, in this case, a quotation from Chaucer. And typically, copyright information is put on the rear-facing pages. So there we go. Now there's a forward here. I've actually just grabbed a piece of text from a previous attempt I had to lay this thing out, and so I'll just read a moment of it for you. I may well change this. The Bullet Catcher's Handbook is a collection of sayings, aphorisms, and technical knowledge accumulated by travelling conjurers. Being the product of many different authors in different centuries, the entries vary widely in style and content. Some seem to be transcriptions from an earlier oral tradition, possibly medieval in origin. Others belong to the golden age of stage magic, and so on. One thing to note here, and I'm just going to shrink the page down a little bit so you can see the entire page. I'm probably going to end up with more pages on the screen than I want. But here we go. This is the page I'm just looking at. Note that I've not started at the very top of the page. I could have started up here, but I've given it a little extra space. The reason for that, I just think that when we're composing, in this sense of composing margin sizes, etc., that we are in some senses composing with the white space. For me, I'm short-sighted. Take my glasses off, everything turns into a blur. Actually, I've got astigmatism as well, so it doubly blurs. So now I look at it and I can see the texture of the writing without being able to read it, and I can see the white space, and it's that white space I'm kind of composing with, and I think it looks better just to come down a little bit. So I'm just going to bump the size up a bit so we go back down to the 2-page view. The other thing to note is that I have fully justified this. So left and right edges are straight lines, as opposed to doing this, which is left justification. So when we write an essay or something like that, we tend to left justify. But if you look at most books are fully justified. And this leads to some aberrations. So what aberrations we have, for example, you can see in here some of the words are more widely spaced than others. It may not look perfectly right. This is particularly a problem where we come down to fairly narrow pages, like an A6 page, with fairly wide margins. And you can get some aberrations there. However, I still think that I want to go with a fully justified document, And I think for this bit of text, if I get anything that's too much of an aberration, I may just go in and tweak the writing, tweak the words to make it less odd looking. But I want that sense of the block of print, because I think that looks more like a book. So on we go. I've dropped in another woodcut here. This one is actually a 17th century, I believe, or actually no, it's a 16th century woodcut, which is supposedly depicting, and I'm using the terminology that was used with this, a gypsy family, so a Romany family, as we would say, and it goes quite well with the bit of text because it appears to be two people meeting, and this is where it says in the text, many of the verses are constructed to work as a call and response, with the idea established by the first voice, which is then twisted by the second voice, and it goes on. So the two people appear to be in conversation, so that's good. Then a contents page, the contents page again on a front-facing page. If it had happened to work out in the text that it was on a rear-facing page, I would have left a blank page in order to get it front-facing. And don't be afraid of putting in blank sides, blank leaves. So, sorry, not blank leaves, blank pages. So I've said on philosophy, it's the first selection of these aphorisms, these entries, on secrets and lies, on misdirection, and so on. And I've just put an X in because I don't know what the page number is going to be yet. I've not set this up as Microsoft Word's automatic contents page generator because I didn't want any of that. I wanted to be able to control it completely because I have certain requirements. The other thing to note is I've put a full stop in the titles, the same where we said forward at the top, forward dot. Again, this is not something we do now, but I've noticed it as something certainly in the 19th century. I've seen a lot of titles with a full stop after them, and that slight oddness, putting it away from what we're familiar with into something that seems slightly odd, is what I'm after. But again, I've left the same spaces above as I did with the place where it said forward. Now I'm going to need to have something, I think, a little piece of prose about the philosophy aspect, and I'm going to sandwich that between the contents page and the beginning of the first aphorism, but I'm going to just jump straight through here because I haven't written that yet. And this is the way I'm hoping to lay it out, more or less. So, pairs of pages, front-facing page with the aphorism from the Bullet Catcher's Handbook, rear-facing page with a smaller font with the explanatory notes. And again, I've just grabbed a whole load of these notes that I wrote at some stage in the past and just dropped them in here. I don't think they will earn their place, and I will be trimming them back. What I want to evoke here is the feeling of some of the early Bibles that I've seen, which have annotations and codifications, and where you end up with some text in red and some text in black, and where you have numerous notes to explain what's going on. So that's what I'm kind of evoking. I've chosen to use Greek letters with the for my references, and to use those in red. Greek letters, again, it's to give it that slightly antiquated feel. And I've chosen a kind of numbering system like someone who might do if they were codifying a set of documents. So here we go, the first one. There was once a line marked out by God through which were divided heaven and hell. And then note alpha, early suggestions that the community of bullet catchers was inclined towards the Catholic faith have been proved incorrect, blah, blah, blah. It can just go on in that way. So there's a certain amount of world building involved in this book. And we go on, and so I've gathered together all these sort of generally philosophical aphorisms that in some cases are perhaps cleverly meaningful, and in some cases perhaps somewhat meaningless, as I think this one maybe is not so meaningful. If a cabinet has only 6 sides, then the trick will be found on its 7th. There we go. And that's it. That's what I've done so far. I've just put together those. And I'm kind of pleased with the way it's looking. One thing that's slightly alarming, though, is that I've got to the bottom of this first section and I'm already on page 32. So that makes me feel that the whole thing is going to be somewhat longer than I had thought. I had imagined a book very much of this sort of dimensions, and probably with a thickness of about 1 centimetre. But now I'm thinking it's possibly going to be more chunky than that. Problem with that is, of course, it's more expensive to print. Now, I have 1 or 2 people have been very kind in seeing these videos and various things I've posted on Twitter to say, oh yeah, please, I would like a copy. I hope you produce it so I can have a copy. And that's wonderful. I love you all. You're so supportive of this whole project, and you've been such a powerful motivating force for me in carrying on writing the thing. But I kind of have to figure out, and there is an odd equation here, if I can produce this thing in a way that people will want to pay that amount of money for. So I think about it and I think, well, if I were to print 100 copies, how much would it cost per copy? And I can work that out with various printing cost calculators, which you can find online, and it kind of comes out, if I want the hardback, which I kind of do for this because I just feel it'll feel more authentic, that it comes out reasonably expensive, and then I need to charge a little bit more than it actually costs, because otherwise I'll inevitably make a loss out of it because we'll never sell them all. So yeah, so it's that kind of calculation I'm doing at the moment as I go along. But so far so good. I'm really pleased with it. And that's the end of this video.